All right, here we are. Common Sense Ohio, commonsenseohioshow.com. It is February 7, 2025. How about that? I mean, we're in February already. Before you know it, we're going to have the Arnold Festival here in Columbus, Ohio. For those who don't know, you don't know. But for those who do know, you do know. Arnold Schwarzenegger loves Columbus, Ohio for all sorts of reasons. Maybe we'll get into that as it gets closer. If you want to check us out, obviously, commonsenseohioshow.com. We are on all the socials. That means YouTube and Rumble. We're rumbling around. That means wherever else. I'm not big into that stuff. But we have people who are. We are here at Channel 511 Studios, brought to you by 511 Studios. Anyway, for those who know, we do a segment called This Day in History that kicks us off every week. And that's what we're going to do. February 7th, 2025. Norm is appearing remotely. Where are you, Norm?
Orlando, Florida.
Orlando, Florida. I'm sure the weather is better than it is here.
Yeah, it was like 80 degrees yesterday for a little while. Down here for family function, so a happy one. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if I, it's almost like you're here on Zoom, and I could just reach out and hold your hand. I want to hold your hand because on February 7th. It turns out 1964, the British invasion occurs. Beatlemania kicks off as the Beatles, the Pan Am Yankee Clipper Flight 101 from London Heathrow lands at New York's Kennedy Airport. Beatlemania comes with it. 6 days before, I Want to Hold Your Hand was number one in the U.S. And then shortly after that, there is the famous appearance on Ed Sullivan, and really changes the face of American music forever, huh?
Yeah. Hey, did they ever play like in Columbus? I know they played in Cincinnati, the Beatles.
I have no idea. We should look that up while we're talking about it. But, you know, I caught the second half. You know, I was born in 1970, so I wasn't there for the British invasion, but the music I grew to know and love was sort of a product of that. And the Rolling Stones came shortly after, and, you know, the rest was history. And I think it sort of melded the cultures in a way and advanced. It changed everything, I guess.
It's funny. I remember somebody joking around that something about you don't want to be like the group that appeared after the Beatles on Sullivan.
Right.
It's like, and I had to look it up going, yeah, who did appear? It was like magician Fred Capps. Can you imagine magician Fred in the wings going, I am so screwed.
Right.
I could create the best magic trick in the world. It doesn't matter.
Right. He's producing canaries and flowers.
We have a really big shoe. However, Ed, you know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Just feel terrible for him, you know.
Terrible.
Yeah. So anyway, the British invasion occurred, and that is the fact for this day in history. So,
you know, Ed, like, he got a lot of criticism from that Elvis appearance. I wonder he probably didn't get any blowback about the Beatles because they weren't swinging their hips around and all that Elvis stuff. But man, that was controversial when he had Elvis on.
That was really controversial. And I know that when the Beatles came and sort of changed the face of music, we had like our artists in the United States, you know, everything changed, you know, it was a watershed moment in not just music, but also culture, I think.
TV history as well, too.
And TV, yeah. I mean,
you know, if TV wasn't around, or at least in that form, who knows? Beatles may not have been that. They probably would have hit a radio network.
Yeah, but not the same.
But it's not the same.
Not the same.
Yeah. These girls are just falling all over each other and fainting, and cameras are on them.
Right.
No.
You know, from that tour, if you go on some of these serious auction sites, you know, where things have legitimate provenance, from that tour, like a signed photograph or album or single with all four signatures is $10,000 to $12,000.
I would think. I would have guessed more, but that's just
wow.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm sure that changes as time goes on. But
upwards.
Yeah. The memorabilia and all that. There's a huge market with that stuff. So anyway, that is this day in history. Now we will turn to news with Norm. Norm, even from Orlando, is going to bring us all the latest.
Well, combing through this fire hose of stuff coming out of DC, it's so much to digest. that's almost impossible. I think Trump is up to almost 500 executive orders and actions, in 2.5 weeks or whatever it's been. It's just like the traditional media can't keep up with it. So I just picked out a few things, and then I'm sure you guys will, things will occur to you about different aspects of what's going on. Both what he's doing and the reaction to what he's doing is fascinating. So they swore in Pam Bondi as Attorney General. She got through her, hearings and successfully. And her first order, I believe, I read, was to form a weaponization of government task force within the Department of Justice, which, of course, itself was accused of being weaponized. So she wants to get to the bottom of who in the DOJ was behind these various hoaxes and various, politically driven pursuits under Biden, under Trump, under Obama, wherever. And I think that is a remarkable development for the DOJ to kind of do an enema, on its own self. And to what degree did the FBI, which is part of DOJ, all of that, where are all the bodies buried? And her first act is to, I guess, kind of sanitize the Department of Justice. So
what's amazing,
I hope it's fair, and I hope it's bipartisan. And, but if it isn't, if the Democrats don't want to cooperate, I guess the FBI agents can resign, and the DOJ people, they can leave if they don't want to participate.
Well, and isn't that essentially what Trump said? Look, any man who doesn't want to get shot better clear on out the back. I mean, he gave everybody a pass. Like, look, you can, you government employees, and I don't know if it was DOJ workers, but the point is the same. It's like they can leave now. And what's interesting, I think what's amazing to me is the notion, like on the face of this stuff, not only this order, but everything else that's happening, is this idea that we're going to get to the heart of government spending, where our dollars are going. We're going to reform all of that nonsense. We're going to streamline all that nonsense. We're going to get rid of corruption. We're going to, that seems like at least a stated purpose. So who would object to that? If that were Obama doing it, I'd be in favor. If that were Biden doing it, I would be in favor. If that is Trump doing it, people hate it. And it makes you wonder, when I ask rhetorically, who would object to that? Who would object to it? So, you're getting over the target a little bit when you start exposing some of the government waste and the government corruption and the stuff that nobody ever knew about except for those in the swamp. And I don't think people like having that stuff exposed. I don't think that, pulling back the curtain is difficult.
Well, and those that are against Trump, I thought about this yesterday too, about, okay, put a timetable to all this wasteful spending. It touches his administration as well, too.
It absolutely does.
So, Democrats, Republicans, whatever, it's time. We've complained about this enough. Let's do something about it. He is doing something about it. And look at the timetable of the stuff that's being spent. Mm-hmm. It touches his administration, too. So he's just as fault as anybody else. We've said this at the table.
Yeah. And at least he's willing to say, enough's enough.
Enough's enough.
We're going to get to the heart of it. And what's the department, the Foreign Affairs?
The USAID?
Yeah, the USAID. I mean, anybody who reads this, if it's true, and I don't know, I'm just reading the headlines, but if the line items that we're hearing about are true, it's insane to me.
It is.
It is insane. Yeah. I was talking to Glenn over at Harper Plus Accounting this morning. We have our morning chats sometimes. And somebody said, and he told me this, somebody said, if you just took all the USAID spending, that's enough to give every person, everybody that's 18 years old, $10,000 in a retirement account, and then just watch it grow. It's like, that's the kind of money we're talking about that's getting pissed away.
All right.
And
that's not to say USAID is not a bad organization. In its infancy, it was probably a good organization. It started for good reason, and it got out of hand. To
combat communism and sort of provide ideological alternatives for more sinister forms of thought. And then it was immediately hijacked and turned into an agenda platform with money that was unaccounted for otherwise. Right. So look, if anybody on the right, anybody on the left that's objecting to some of this to ferreting this out and stopping it, shame on you. I can't objectively see a downside. Now, the downside, of course, or there is one downside, and that is if we cut off our influence, what fills the vacuum?
Right.
China. And I guess that would be the flip side of just eliminating it altogether. But so we have to be mindful of that. On the other hand, we're not providing any meaningful influence. We're just giving money for BS.
The programs they're talking about were pretty lightweight. Let's put it that way. It didn't seem to be moving the needle.
Whether you believe in transgender ideology or not, spending millions on some foreign country to promote transgender ideology is insane.
It probably isn't as an important issue as something else.
Right.
Probably in the scope of things, probably not.
Probably not. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, what is super mind-blowing about this USAID revelations that are coming out is the extent to which over the years, including, as Brett just said, during the Trump years, where USAID was funding via subscriptions that were amalgamated within different departments. So in essence, take Politico.
Yeah.
Politico, which was an enemy of the Trump, like Politico was actively against Trump and spreading the hoax about Russia and collusion and all that. So under his own administration, it was funding political activity by his own foes in the public domain. Politico, it has come out between 2016, which of course is when Trump took office, and 2025 has gotten a total of $34 million, which they have acknowledged. But they said, it's subscriptions. Well, that's like buying a politician's book. Like that's just another way to funnel money to a political organization.
Well,
now
go ahead.
The AP, the Associated Press, from 2009 to 2025, got 37.5 million. The BBC, which is a foreign news service, right, got $3 million. Like, why are we funding the BBC? Like, that's insane.
So, I mean, the government, quote, government would say, the people in support of this would say, well, I mean, we're just people working for the government and we should have access to the news, so we should have our subscriptions paid for by the government. But if you're a taxpayer, as am I, my job doesn't pay for my subscriptions. It's like you take the paper, or you used to take the paper anyway. Now you get it digitally. I mean, whatever you pay, you pay. I mean, it doesn't.
Right.
I can't imagine that's a legitimate perk that the taxpayers would be interested in funding. And then if you're looking where Trump is sitting, I always try to reverse things, guys. So let's say it was Biden. And it turns out that there is, at first they said 8 million, then they said 16 million to Politico.
Now it's 34 million.
To let's say a conglomerate. Let's say 16 million went to Fox News, and you're Joe Biden in the White House. Would anybody be cool with that? Would anybody be cool with government people under Biden, government funding people under Biden to get subscriptions to Fox News? No, they wouldn't.
No.
They wouldn't for a second. So don't give me any nonsense that this is just legitimate. And then what they're going to say is, well, it's Politico. It's fair and balanced. It's bullshit. They were after Trump, and they are after. I mean, they came down on him and they were actively working against him. And Brett, to your point, a bit ago, I read an article. It was on the Daily Wire. I read an article that sort of gave the history. Obama created something called the U.S. Digital Service. Did you guys see this?
No.
So the U.S. Digital Service was designed to fix healthcare.gov back in when Obamacare was. Remember, the website was a mess.
Yeah.
And it just sort of morphed into this digital service, but it morphed into an ideological service where it became a left-wing propaganda machine, and they were actively working. Trump kept it, and they were actively working against him the entire time. And I think what Trump has done this time is he's come in and he said, enough's enough. He learned his lesson. Enough's enough. He's cutting all this stuff. And the other side can fault him for this only to the extent that they disagree with the ideology. Fine. But again, if it were reversed, if Biden inherited an organization within the White House that was actively working against him, he would have cut it, and nobody would have bitched about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this too. Trump has the advantage that this is his last term.
Mm-hmm.
He can pretty much pull out both six shooters and come out shooting.
And come out, and he's doing it.
Because he doesn't have to worry about being reelected.
And he's doing it. Right.
That is his advantage this time.
And by the way, this U.S. Digital Services was just created with outside Silicon Valley, quote, experts. You know, it's a lot like Doge is the premise of this article, right? So there are people that are complaining about Doge having no basis, no legal basis, no governmental basis. Well, Obama did the same thing. And fair enough, you know, you can say that neither are correct because one wrong doesn't fix another, but it's not like there's not precedent for this either. So,
well, Doge doesn't get to make any policy actions. They're just a recommending agency, or like the Grace Commission.
They're auditors.
That's all. Well, but they have no. What I mean is, they have no official government control over it.
It's like hiring an outside auditor to come into your business
That's all it is.
and go through your books and find stuff. And you know, having worked dozens of employment theft cases, those are the people that find this crap. So look, I'm not making as much money as I thought I was making. I talk to my accountant. I call an outside. Well, let's get an auditor in there and figure out what's going on. And lo and behold, you find like $1 million worth of theft because the person who you thought was your right-hand person is a no good, rotten thief. Or maybe you got several. Or maybe you start to identify. Sure. Well, wait a minute. Why am I paying for all my employees' digital subscriptions to Netflix and Politico and this and this and this? You start to. That's where you find it, because what happens is we all run businesses. And what happens is over time, you just get accustomed to the repeating expenses.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So in the Politico example, it's kind of a little bit different. So the individual employees are not subscribing. What happened, the way to transfer this money and make it look legit was, say you're the head of the Department of Agriculture, and in your building you have 200 employees. Well, you just, by your own volition, just sign up 200 employees for individual subscriptions. That in effect is a way to send, whatever, $15,000 from your building right to Politico, and you know what they're going to do with it.
Remember the days? You remember the days when you got the physical printed magazine, and it got handed around the office, and you put your initials on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so old school, I know, but it's the same thing. We need one or two subscriptions. Pass the magazine around. Put your initials on it when you've read it.
Yeah.
So some of the programs, like these are minor ones. I'll get a couple big ones, but to support what Steve was saying about how crazy and unhinged some of this was. $70,000 to put on a DEI musical in Ireland. $47,000 to put on a trans opera in Colombia.
Now let me just stop you there. Yeah. I don't care if it's trans. I don't care if it's DEI. I don't want an opera. I don't want to pay for an opera or a musical in some other country with my tax dollars. Right. Yeah. It's lunacy. And then to make it trans or DEI, it's like a second punch in the gut after you already doubled over.
Yeah, well, and it shows you like what are their priorities. Like if you were putting on a musical, say about George Washington or D-Day, or something that's makes our country look good, or it cements relationships, I guess you could say, okay, let's put on an opera in Colombia about how we got rid of Pablo Escobar, working together with the Colombian government. And I guess you could say that's an anti-drug effort or whatever.
But people on the other side, Norm, that the anti-America people, meaning the far left, would say, no, our country is founded on this racist, horrible ideals. We don't support this. And they have every right to say that, because the government shouldn't be spending money that way anyway, right? It's the same in reverse.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it reeks of that 1619 effort or whatever. Such crap, I mean, right. So some of the more outrageous and a little bit more serious things. So we had this program with refugees in Syria between 2015 and 2018, $122 million for food kits. And out of that, 9 million, and this has been prosecuted, there is somebody who was diverting $9 million to Al Qaeda in Iraq out of that $122 million pool. Another one, and you guys probably remember seeing this on the news, in Ethiopia during the famine, there was that civil war going on. And they showed pictures of USAID bundles of grain being unloaded on the docks. And dudes, it turns out that all went to the armies. The warring armies pilfered that away.
Of course.
The civilians didn't get the grain. And this shows the naivete of the people running USAID.
Well,
they wanted that photograph on the news, but they didn't really give a crap where it went.
Well, and there's something else that we should at least discuss, and that is it's not like a small business here where the president is writing a check, or even the Secretary of Treasury is writing a check to fund these things.
Yeah.
This money gets funneled through. And so it's not just the 70 million going this place, or the 10 million going over here, or the 70,000 going over here. This is funneled through how many employees with benefits, with jobs, with perks, with everything else. So this is funneled through like departments that rent space, and it's not just the money that's getting spent. It's the waste in human labor and resources that we're also paying for. So, the 70,000 is probably really 500,000 after you filter it through the government.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'm making that up, that number, but
but I know what you mean.
You're
like
filtering
if you did a full,
right.
Yeah. Full audit, right? Yeah. You would find out that along the way, all these steps, people who had to sign off, and then, 15 minutes of this guy, 30 minutes of that guy, 4 weeks of this lady.
Travel. So look, and think of the perks. Well, I think that I should go to Ireland to monitor this this musical. So there's a free trip for somebody I guarantee this is happening.
Oh, yeah.
I would bet anything this is happening. And then you wonder, all right, well, I wonder what the people who work for this department, if they had any interest, financial or otherwise, in the stage lighting company or the or whatever else is happening. And I would almost bet if you really went in like a proctologist here, you could come up with even more obscene waste.
The most amazing thing about DOGE, this advisory department on government efficiency with Elon Musk at the head, to me, the most amazing thing is the reaction of the media. Now, like we had Jerry Revish, 40 years in the media, on our previous show, and he and I talked about what journalism school taught us, and it was all about demanding transparency and openness, and issuing these demands for records from the government. And the idea was the media wanted to expose things. They wanted to have daylight shown in every corner of the government. And today's media, reacting to DOGE, they want DOGE to be handcuffed. They want less transparency.
Isn't it crazy?
The media has sued, and some of the attorney generals in blue states have sued to restrict Elon's access to things like the Treasury Department's checking system.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is as unpleasant as it is, because look, on some level, it's embarrassing that the government has wasted this much money. It's sort of like if you had to share your 5 years of credit card statements to somebody on the outside, and they see all the stops at McDonald's and the stupid money, the convenience store stops where you spend $5 on 2 Cokes instead of going to buy a 12-pack for the same price. Like, we all do that kind of stuff, and it's embarrassing. But beyond that, there's an agenda. I think the deeper concern is there's an agenda that they don't want exposed, because it's nobody, I don't want to say nobody, but most Americans would not approve of these agendas, yet it's happening.
Yeah, you remember that 2 of the USAID administrators had to be fired because they refused to turn over the records to DOGE, and so they had to be let go. And it's like the media doesn't want us to know, the traditional legacy media. They don't want us to know what USAID, like they're assisting the government or the swamp in trying to bury this stuff
because they know what's there. They know what's there. And you wonder, like I always say, money, power, ego motivates the world.
Yeah.
So I wonder, where's the money getting funneled? What is the media's interest in all of this? And how does it work? Because now we have a scenario and this is a good segue to this, and it's important to what we're doing here in the podcast realm. I was talking to a dear friend, Norm. You had dinner with him last week, and we had dinner last night. We were talking about this. It's like the podcast world changed the landscape politically this time around. It just did. And now
citizen journalism.
Yes. And now we've got a situation where the donations, I'll call them donations, or the subscriptions to Politico, to the AP, to all these sources, those sources are against stopping that because they're making money, and they're getting funded. So of course they don't want to stop that flow of money. And then you've got another problem like PBS and in the public broadcast system. I mean, they've become arms of the left. They're reporting news directly against the president. And if you're the president, you would say, well, wait a minute, I'm just going to cut you, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, and it's interesting you bring up the example of the NPR situation. I think until it comes out, and which I've heard, because I was always curious, like how much money does NPR get? And it's dwindled over the years through administrations. 5% of their budget is from the government. If I were NPR, I'd say goodbye 5%.
Bye-bye, right.
And now we can do what we want to do.
And
because it's 5%. Now we don't have to look at how underwriting is written. We don't have to worry about this and complain and moan.
Get off my cloud, man. I can do what I want.
It's already gone. It's 5%. Just wipe it away.
And
done.
Brett, wasn't my understanding of public radio, public television, and NPR is that at a certain time back in the late 60s or the 60s and 70s, we only had 3 channels.
Right.
And there was a competition to get airwave space. So the government wanted to carve out a niche where anybody could be part of it. But it slowly has morphed. I mean, anybody who listens to NPR over the last 5-10 years knows that it has not been in favor of Donald Trump. They've actively reported against him, and they're reporting stories that it's like they're more ideological stories. Fine, they have every right to do it, but they don't have a right to do it on my dime.
Right.
They have a right to do it on their own dime, and there's commercials anyway on NPR already.
Sure.
So just cut it.
Sure.
Cut it.
Many of the public television superstars like Bob Vila, the Muppets, these people have gone on to be mega millionaires off of a platform that the taxpayers paid for. And so they've launched, they have enormous companies and a lot of wealth and it's amazing to me that there wasn't some sort of contract or something that like, okay, Bob, you get to go sell tools for Sears and Roebuck, but because you got your start, the only reason you're famous is because of the taxpayers supporting PBS. So, a portion of what you earn outside should come back. And, it's just been, I think, very lax on that.
And again, I would reverse this in a second.
Yes.
If NPR became a mouthpiece for the right, and that was it, then I feel the same way. And the problem is not who they're a mouthpiece for; it's the fact that the government is funding it. It becomes Pravda, right? Anybody who knows history, it becomes Pravda. It becomes propaganda. And
to your point, this USAID, it's widely known. I mean, this isn't even disputable. Nobody's disputing it. That it is being actually controlled and coordinated with the CIA. These are goals.
Well, it was created with that in mind, right? I mean,
exactly.
It was created to influence other cultures.
Exactly.
And look, maybe like you said, Brett, maybe at one point there was a need for that, but now it's obviously been twisted into something else,
morphed into something that shouldn't be.
And if you don't have the entire country on board with this, get rid of it.
It's like Voice of America was another CIA idea, to broadcast into the former Soviet Union news about what's going on. And I assume we're doing that with Chinese too, is broadcasting in there because they can't get our news unfiltered. So that's the whole point of Voice of America, but it should be real. To your point, Steve, it shouldn't be biased.
Yeah. As soon as it becomes an agenda, and here's the problem. It always will become an agenda. It has to. And if you're the president on one side or the other, if you're on one side of the debate versus the other side of the debate, there's no way you're tolerating this under your regime. There's no way. And anybody who would expect otherwise is nuts, because Biden would not have tolerated NPR running stories that undermined his agenda. He would not have tolerated it, nor should he have.
Right.
And why should Trump? And the better question is not why should either of them tolerate it. It's why are the taxpayers funding it in the first place?
Yeah.
Well, we've done a lot of national news. Just some quick hits then. You guys can riff off of this, but just some items, some bullets. The U.S. Army has reported that recruitment is the highest it's been in 15 years since the election, which is interesting. And I think it goes to a point Steve made weeks ago that after the election, you just felt like the country was somehow a little bit like walking a little bit more proud, feeling a little bit more sunny, a little bit more patriotic or something.
Well, you could
There's
breathe
something
again
in the air.
So look, I mean, take this exponentially. Anybody who runs a small business, and we all do, understand that all the little things you have to contend with day in and day out add up. And it's like at some point the straw breaks your back. And and I'm not saying that my business is subject to a lot of government regulation, but it is subject to some. Now, if you're in a business that is like you're constantly trying to meet some regulatory requirement, and now they've been ramped up and ramped up and ramped up and ramped up, it adds up. And if you're worried about some response from the government, say if you're in the news media or if you're in the social media or you're wherever else that the government has sort of had its hand, when that's gone, you can breathe again. And you can just go out and prosper. And I was at dinner last night with some small business guys, and they're all just like, man, we're looking forward to the next 4 years because we can just go do our business.
Yeah, right. Let us release the shackles. This is interesting. Like one day after Trump issued this executive order about no men in women's sports, or we're not going to fund your universities or whatever, the NC2A adopted that policy. So finally, Riley Gaines and these people who have been, saying, hey, the trans guys like Leah Thomas that set all these female swimming records, but they still have their male junk. They're men, right? Trump said no more of that. And the NC2A immediately changed its policy to the exact same thing.
Now it's follow the money. It's a follow the money situation. Yeah,
that's
ultimately,
right.
If you think about it, follow the money, follow the power.
You wonder if so, but you're making a good point, but we should also discuss sort of what's bubbling underneath that, which is why did they switch in the first place to this notion that women can compete or men can compete in women's sports? It's because the power of the government was sort of forcing that decision. So we started with the main line of men were men, women were women. They all had their separate sports in college athletics, and life worked for how many hundreds of years. Then all of a sudden it changes, and that didn't change overnight because whoever's running the NCAA decided, you know what, I've been giving this a lot of thought. I think that men can be women, and it's all the same to let them compete in women's sports. Whether you believe in that or not, that wasn't a notion that landed in whoever's making that decision over because they just had a revelation. That was influenced by government money, by government power, by government push, right? So now, when that's off, it immediately ends, and we're back to the baseline. So and I guess you could make the argument the other way that the new decision is based on government power and influence, but that's where it started. So it's a little bit different.
And we're dealing with a small number as well. If I heard the number correctly, we're dealing with 500,000 NCAA players, both women and women. There's only like 50 that are classified transgender, the men playing on the women's teams or whatever the case might be. To me, is amazing that this small minority has changed our landscape so fast.
Well,
you know what I mean? I'm just saying. It's why has this become such a thing when it should never have been? Men are men, women are women.
Right. It's sort of
now
sense,
we're
right?
kowtowing to 50 of these NCAA. 50.
Yeah, it was crazy, Brett. I agree with you.
Yeah,
it's great. It was nuts that the rights, if you want to put that in quotes, or the desires of 50 people changed a country of 350 million people.
Right.
Like it's like what?
Well, and it's not only what's amazing though is it's only 50 people, but the impact was pretty significant. Like with Riley Gaines,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty significant impact. It's one of the biggest things in her world. In female swimming or female volleyball, which is another place where this has really shown its ugly head. Or I've seen it in wrestling. I mean, it's crazy, but it's crazy. It's crazy.
Well, and think of the Title IX effects. So you have these young women graduating from high school, competing for slots for scholarships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if dudes are allowed to take those spots from women, it is the exact opposite of the intent of Title IX.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is real money. That is money for families. Those are scholarship slots that families may have invested 8 years of their girls playing softball or volleyball or swimming, and it's taken from them by a man.
Well, anybody who listens to Lawyer Talk, my attorney sort of podcast, and you should, if you're not, lawyertalkpodcast.com, knows that I'm a stickler for the logical application of the law. And it all starts with definitions. You have to have common definitions in order to have any systemic, fair approach at law.
Yeah.
And in order to have a common, in the premise of what we're talking about here is a man is a man, a woman is a woman. But if you change the definition of man and woman, then immediately you have chaos in the law. Now say, well, I'm a man, but I'm really a woman because I'm just going to redefine what woman means to include me. Now I have essentially, as a man, taken over all the rights that, like you said, Norm, Title IX was carved out to protect. And so this has always fascinated me how every woman in the world would be how any woman in the world would be in favor of this, because you can't, if I'm raising my daughter and she's worked her tail off to be a swimmer, and then she can't compete against a man, and she has to compete against a man where she can't win. I mean, it just seems insane. It's utter insanity. And it's not that I'm not empathetic or sympathetic for the guy who thinks he's a girl or whatever. I mean, create another league or create your own league. I don't care, but don't take it away from women.
Yeah, 100%, dude. Well, one of the other things that's really hot right now, of course, is, Trump or President Biden, pardoned Fauci for anything back, I think, to 2014, which was when the Obama order came out that, we don't want to do gain of function research. We don't want to finance it. So from that point on, Fauci was, I guess, preemptively pardoned for any kind of prosecution. Well, 17 state AGs have gotten this. Brad Winstrup, of course, our Cincinnati congressman who just left office. He retired from the Congress. But before he did that huge report on COVID and all the actions, missteps, and lies, frankly, by Fauci and several people. These 17 state AGs do not feel as if they're bound whatsoever legally by that pardon. And they're going to pursue Fauci.
Well, there's
on state charges.
Two different jurisdictions, right? You have state and federal jurisdictions, and the president can't pardon you from a state conviction. So the governors can. The state governors could step in, I guess. So there's some interesting stuff going on. One would be, and both these things work against each other. As I've said here at the table, you have a notion where as soon as you're pardoned, you can't be prosecuted. You have immunity. Well, that means you've lost your Fifth Amendment rights. So start putting these guys put them under oath and start questioning them. And if they don't answer questions, then you throw them in jail in contempt. It's like you can't, they can't run at that point. Now, the opposite of that would be, well, if I offer any testimony, I'm going to take the Fifth because my answers might incriminate me in a state court conviction. So there's a paradox here a little bit, but we shall see how it unfolds. If you've got a zealous state court attorney general or a state level attorney general who is going to want to pursue an investigation of Fauci and others, I mean, they can do it. They can do it.
Yeah. And by the way, our attorney general in Ohio is not one of the 17.
Yost is not. So far, Yost is not on that
so far
bandwagon.
Dave Yost.
I think
Speaking
history.
of which,
Oh, hold
go
on one
ahead.
second. But one more point on that. I think history
Yeah.
will reveal that we have lived through the two most significant scandals in our country's history. At least up there in the competition of our history scandals. One is COVID, and the other will be Joe Biden's incompetence for his tenure in the White House. I think eventually that will all unfold. We will figure out, and history will tell the tale of exactly how what his mental state was. And we are already starting to peel the layers of the COVID onion to get to the bottom of that.
You know, Steve, that harkens back to something historians really find objectionable, and I'm not talking in a partisan way, but historians in general decry like the last 2 years, I think it was, of the Woodrow Wilson administration, because he had a stroke or some kind of medical event that took him out of commission for the last couple of years. And Mrs. Wilson was effectively president. And, it's kind of come out that like information goes into the White House, and then signed orders come back out of the White House on behalf of President Wilson. And it was really her deciding things.
Yep. And look, that's it's interesting history, but at the time it would have been a huge scandal if it would have been totally revealed to the American public. And look, I brought this up to somebody and they said, well, what about Reagan? It shows that he had Alzheimer's at the time of his during the last couple of years of his second term. I'm like, that's equally bad. It's like if that were the case and it was covered up, it is equally bad. It doesn't make the Biden situation better. It makes them both bad. I always hear this. Like, what about? We impinge rights all the time. I hear it with the anti-Second Amendment folks. Well, there's all sorts of laws that say impinge on your First Amendment rights. I'm like, yeah, one right or one law that impinges or that is accepted to limit your First Amendment rights doesn't make another one better or okay.
Yeah.
Right. They all should be looked at with the same scrutiny. So just because we happen to limit your free speech for things like fighting words doesn't mean that we can limit your conduct within other rights like the Second Amendment. So the whataboutism doesn't work, logically speaking.
Yeah. Well, Steve and Brett, I think both of you accurately predicted that in this Doge thing, that either Vivek Ramaswamy or Elon Musk would not be long for the bullshit. And it turns out you guys were right, because Vivek left Doge. He's now running for governor of Ohio. He has made that formal announcement. Frank LaRose, our Secretary of State, has removed himself from the governor race. He's now going to run for auditor. John Husted, the vice,
Lieutenant,
the assistant governor,
Louis
the
governor,
deputy,
Louis governor. Yeah.
Thank you. The lieutenant governor of Ohio has now taken, of course, J.D. Vance's seat in the Senate, so he's out of the governor race. And then Robert Sprague, the state representative, he dropped out and endorsed Vivek. So what we have left is our Attorney General Dave Yost, who's announced, versus Vivek Ramaswamy. That's what it looks like. It's going to be a battle between those two to win the Republican nomination to succeed Mike DeWine as governor.
Predictions, gentlemen?
Husted is actually out, though. He cannot run.
Well,
he can, but he just took the Senate seat.
He just took the Senate seat.
So he's not really going to. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know.
That's who you would have thought would sort of
yeah.
win.
Oh, yeah.
But I think Yost had. I think Yost.
I don't know.
Yost has had his eye on that seat for a while.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I'd put money on any of that yet. I don't know because the conversations from both have been in different directions versus this seat.
Yeah.
In regards to running Ohio.
Yeah.
That to me is important. Going, I want to hear what you say about running Ohio versus running the United States.
Yes.
Right. The next chair and Yost, I don't know. I mean, he's all over the place anyway. So.
Yeah, I think
I don't know yet.
Norm, what's your prediction? And then I'll give you mine.
Well, I hope that there are debates, because I think both of these guys are both really good, stump speakers.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be a clash of titans. I think this is going to be, and this is good for the people of Ohio to have a choice like this.
Yeah.
a younger guy, a Zoomer or whatever gen he is, against Dave Yost, right? Who's, if you will, part of the, swamp of Ohio. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but he is.
Well, he's an he's an established politician in Ohio for years.
Right. Yeah. And so this will be really interesting. And I guess at this point, if I was going to place a bet, somebody had a gun to my head and I had to bet, I think Vivek. I think Vivek might win this.
Interesting.
Because there's this attraction. I think right now it's in the air, this attraction for something new, a breath of fresh air, sweep out the old. And I think Mr. Yost will get caught up in the appearance that he is yesterday's guy, and Vivek is the new guy.
So that puts a big influence on who DeWine puts in the lieutenant governor's position.
Who he endorses, really.
He endorses, exactly, because
that's a big one.
That's a big
one. And
one.
we know Vivek went and met with DeWine to see about getting that Senate seat.
Okay, right.
And he didn't get it from DeWine. That doesn't mean that the two don't like you. Right. I'm not saying that. No. But we'll see. I don't know. I don't know the relationship between DeWine and Dave Yost, for that matter.
I think the cleaner. I'll give you my prediction here in a second, but I think the cleaner transition for all of this assortment would have been Vivek at the Senate. I
agree.
I don't know where Husted would go, but I think Vivek is a better fit in the Senate right now because of all the things you said. Right, he's a younger guy. He's got interesting ideas. He's clearly not constrained by the fear of what people think of him. I mean,
that's true.
He
doesn't seem to have that problem.
To be confident in his ideas, even when they're not necessarily with the grain of even his own party, as we're seeing right now. He's one to throw in his hat against Yost.
Right.
So I don't know. Now, Norm, you make a great point, and that's the point I was making. Why I thought Vivek would have been a better fit in the Senate. But I think underlying all this shows, I think it reflects maybe some dissension in the ranks here in Ohio, because I would think that the Republican leaders, whether it be DeWine, whether it be Yost, whether it be Husted, would sort this out and not air it out in public. Vivek is clearly a force in the party, and he's the younger guy. You want that guy
go to Apple Valley for a retreat.
And figure it out. That's right.
Like,
Steve,
you would want him. You want him on your side. You want that guy.
This idea of the smoke-filled room where it gets sorted out without the public being able to really have a choice. That is the classic way they've picked candidates in both the Democratic and the Republican Party, where they just present, Mike DeWine is the approved Republican choice for governor, and there's not a real runoff that we get to, have a real choice between two.
You're right. No, you're right about that. But my point is, it reflects a division in the party, where you've got the Vivek side of things, which are these younger Republicans that are saying enough, no more rhinoism. We're done.
That's right.
We are off, and we're doing it. And this is who the Dems would call the far right or the MAGA right or whatever they are, which I think those terms are overused. But because I think Vivek has a fair and honest approach at stuff. You don't always have to agree with him, but he's going to tell you what he thinks.
He came out in favor of H-1B visas, to the horror of the MAGA movement. So, but at least he was honest about what his opinion is,
and he's not going to kowtow to necessarily kowtow to the party public or the party politics. I think he'll have to on the big issues, as everybody in a party does. So, but I think it reflects something different. And I agree with you, Norm. I think it's neat to have it all aired out, and I think this is how the Republican Party gets sorted out across the country, with this new breed of younger Republicans sort of saying, enough's enough, you guys.
We're going to primary you.
We're going to go after you. And that's sort of it's sort of becoming accepted. So I don't know how Yost will respond. Yost is no slouch, and he is not necessarily of the DeWine rhino politic. He's got his own way of thinking, and he's come out against things that even as the AG, that reflect his own thought process on stuff. So it'll be interesting to watch it.
Yeah.
So what was your prediction, Steve? You were inching up to it. What do you think?
Here's what I think happens. I think Vivek finds another place in the party and Yost takes it.
Okay. That's entirely likely. It really is. A new piece of legislation that picked up. So Senate Bill 83 died when the session ended in December. And what that was, it was to remove DEI programs, training, classes, etc., from Ohio colleges and universities that are funded by the state. And what held it up last session was so it passed the Senate, but in the House, Speaker Jason Stevens blocked it, so it never got a House vote. This session, it is Senate Bill number 1, the first bill introduced by Senator Jerry Serino, and the Speaker of the House, where it would go next, is a new speaker, Matt Huffman, and he is for this bill. So we may actually get a state bill on top of Trump's orders regarding federal money, a state of Ohio money being prevented going to colleges and universities that have DEI programs.
Yep.
So we'll see if
that'll be interesting. And then, I've always said, let the lawyers sort it out, because sooner or later lawsuits are coming. Somebody's going to sue somebody for not getting a position or a promotion or whatever it is. And this, I think this reflects, I was listening to another commentator, and I think you brought up the military earlier, Norm, where this sort of reflects what's going on in the military. People are rushing to sign up now. But just think if you were a mid-level guy or gal in the Army or the Air Force or whatever, and you're white, and you've had a pretty good career, but you're not going to get any promotions because you're white. You don't fit the DEI initiative. It's like you're going to leave. You're going to leave, and you're going to go join civilian life. Why? I mean, because there's no place for you to go up any higher in the Army. So I think we're going to see more longevity. I think we're going to see more people signing up. And I think this is probably true in every sector where this DEI is infiltrated. And as it's eradicated, you're going to see more retention and more people seeking those professions again. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that, the DEI stuff, I think the concept of it, it's one of those morphing that morphed fast. Mm-hmm. That the concept behind it initially has some legs. It just grew into something that became a political bullet. Yeah,
there's some interesting history, legal history. Like it started with what we used to call affirmative action.
Right.
So back there was a case, I think, out of Michigan. I think it was the University of Michigan, but they could deem it a plus to have a minority status. And that was as far as the court would go. Mm. And it just is now, it's not just a plus, you have to have that in order to advance or succeed or do whatever. And
sometimes maybe we need our eyes opened to other opportunities to hire other people.
Fair enough.
I get, because we live in our own bubbles, and I get that, but it's being forced to the point of now you see nationwide insurance scrapping DEI. And
right.
You know why that is because insurance is so regulated. Now they don't have to.
They don't have to, so they can go pick the candidates that are the best for the job.
Right.
And look,
well, let me give an example that I'm familiar with as a father. I don't want to identify my sons because it's unfair to them. But as a father, I happen to know a little bit about DEI compulsory courses being taught, if you can believe this, in medical school.
The AMA is a big. This is a big deal.
This is a big deal. So this particular student told me that the DEI course load, which is mandatory to graduate from his medical school, was as much or more than some of the anatomical classes or classes that actually have to do with being a doctor.
And you're paying for that. You're paying for it.
Well, it's class time that so there's only so many hours in a day, right?
It's a double whammy. It takes your education and you're paying for it. I mean, it's insane.
Right. Yeah.
And they're not learning about things that they need to know in order to help people with their health or save lives.
mean, look, I think nobody, like in the FAA, nobody's seeking to hire unqualified pilots or unqualified air traffic controllers or unqualified people, right? That's not, I won't go, I can't ascribe that motive to DEI, but
Yeah.
it tends to, the danger is that it happens because if you're going to have to favor, if your edict is so, you have to hire certain people who are trans, certain number of people who are black, or certain number of people who are minorities, for however you want to define it, then you're picking from a smaller pool of candidates and you're excluding others automatically. So not only is there discrimination inherent in that, but you're creating a scenario where your pool of candidates isn't as qualified, or at least assumptively isn't as qualified. So if you're going to get the best person, look, I have hired upstairs in my law practice, men, women, of all races, colors, it doesn't matter to me. I always pick the ones that are the best, I think, for the job. I've always done that.
Sure.
And if I were forced to choose from a smaller pool, anybody who's had to hire somebody and go on the, job.com and or Indeed and find people, and if you had to narrow your search, it would be incredibly frustrating because it's hard to find good people anyway, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
It would be very, very frustrating.
So the riffing off of your point there, in the Wall Street Journal, I think today, it may have been yesterday, is an op-ed piece written by our friends from the Buckeye Institute that Brett and I interviewed, Greg Lawson. There's two con law attorneys that wrote this piece for the Buckeye Institute, Andrew Grossman and Kristen Shapiro. They're DC lawyers, but they wrote it on behalf of the Ohio Buckeye Institute. And what they're telling Trump is, you haven't gone far enough with your DEI orders. You need to clarify your the administration's position on that Students versus Harvard case of 2023, Steve, that we talked a lot about, where it says racial balancing, the key phrase is patently unconstitutional. That's what the key phrase in that decision
is.
You can't attempt. And these were students of mainly Asian extraction that were suing Harvard and Yale and saying, hey, you're not giving us slots. We can't get into the university, much less get scholarships, because you're setting aside X number for a quota system in essence.
But again, Norm, they tried to get around this, and when I debate people or not debate, discuss this with people, the counter argument is always this: yeah, but it's not racism if it's whites against, or if it's blacks against whites, or if it's women against men, or if it's this minority against this majority. It's by definition not racism, because racism is now redefined as one, racism, not prejudice or discrimination. And two, it can't be racist if you are a member of a traditionally minority class against a minority. Then by definition, it's not racism. So therefore, we can do it and it fits within the law. All you had to do is make a little nuance change of the definitions, and it works. And the U.S. Supreme Court is inevitably going to say BS. A rose by any name is still a rose, right? It just is. I mean, so if you're making an employment decision and you're the government, or you're making any governmental decision based upon somebody's race, then that should flag immediately a constitutional problem.
Yeah. So Scalia, what they're saying in their piece is Scalia back in the the Ricky case, or Reese case of 2009, Scalia said, you can't have these two tracks. They don't make any sense. You can't on one side say, like with the Alan Bakke decision, I think you said, out of Michigan, you can't on one side say you can't discriminate on the basis of race. But then on the other hand, in the Griggs and the Reese decision, you can say that if the idea is to have a goal of lessening the disparate impact of choosing people based on merit, and it has a disparate impact on minorities, then it's okay to discriminate. And Scalia is saying, well, how can you resolve those two parallel decisions coming from our own Supreme Court? They're irresolvable. And so what these attorneys are saying to Trump is, you need to come down on the track that's the most recent, and that's the students versus Harvard situation.
Yeah. I mean, but this is Trump. This is classic Trump. He sees this problem. He fixes it. He's not necessarily ideologically inclined, but he sees the problem. And I agree. You know, it's like this will all have to eventually get reevaluated by the U.S. Supreme Court. And if there's anything good coming out of all these orders, even if you're against them, is that we're going to get some clarification at some juncture in the near future from our U.S. Supreme Court about the power of the president to do what Trump is doing. And, you know, this is a long time coming. Obama sort of famously in his second term said, I can do it with my phone and my pen, when he didn't have congressional support. After, in his first term, he said, I can't do that. Right. So as soon as he didn't have support, he did it with his pen and his phone. And then along comes Trump and sort of takes that a little bit further. And along comes Biden again and just goes crazy with it. And along comes Trump. And here we are. He's like, now it's half of it is unwinding what Biden did, but the other half is new. So it's like, all right, we'll find out sooner or later. I love it because it gives our government an opportunity to do what it's intended to do, and that is check and balance the different powers of the different entities. So, you
guys want to do the outrage of the week and then do a wonderful thing of the week?
So the final segment here we will do is wonderfully outrageous. This is where we talk about the things that we like and the things that maybe are a little bit outrageous. Norm, since you're the guest from afar, I'll let you go first.
Well, my outrage was Hillary Clinton weighing in on that collision between the Black Hawk helicopter and the jet air passenger plane, and she weighed in and said the cause. I mean, this is amazing. So the TSB hasn't even been able to really come out with a report. It'll probably be a year from now. But she announced that it was because of the federal employee cuts that Donald Trump did, that he took people out of the tower that otherwise would have been there to prevent this. And so it's Donald Trump's fault that the Black Hawk.
Who stuck a microphone in her mouth and even asked her this question?
Like, why is her opinion at all relevant to this? I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Let's go ask P. Diddy. I mean, he knows just as much as she does.
It's Trump's fault.
So Brett, the brand new Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, wrote a stinger, op-ed back to her, or Twitter or whatever he did. But he's like, that's insane. I mean,
and I would say the same thing if somebody asked Bush.
Yeah, who cares?
Why did somebody put a microphone in front of Bush and ask him what they're so far removed to know what the hell is going on?
If you're that person, if you're a politician, the same as I would say, I'm very curious to see the results of the investigation as to how this could have happened. Right? We need more information. That's the answer to this. If you're in that position.
Yes.
My wonderful thing, and this will so I'm sure somebody will say I'm the grand wizard of the KKK because I'm saying this, but I am sick and tired of being told in every football end zone that America's a racist country and we need to end racism. So to that effect, the NFL's announced that they're going to take that particular phrase off of the end zones because that's ridiculous. End racism. Like, who is against ending racism? Like that's just like, I don't know. It was bizarre to me that the NFL, I guess after George Floyd, decided to put all these labels all over the stadiums and the helmets and the end zones as if we are like this is 1860 America with slavery down south or something. So I'm glad they're retiring that, and that's my wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Brett?
Outrage. I've never been a Canada Geese fan. Never have been. And now to find out that Ohio has been hit the hardest with the avian flu, with eggs, chickens are being killed. It's come from goose shit.
Well, that's interesting.
That's what they're finding out. To me, we outlaw those damn birds. Get them out of here.
Brett,
I don't see a benefit of these damn things.
You've heard of when you go to Mexico, you get Montezuma's revenge. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is Trudeau's revenge.
Maybe. I'm kind of wondering. It was kind of odd. I saw that article a couple of days ago and was like,
it takes a 3-inch shotgun shell to bring one of those
I know.
Sons of guns.
I know, exactly.
I mean they're hard to hunt.
And my wife laughed, and the kids laugh at me too. It's like, you have to stop in traffic and let these damn birds cross the road.
Oh,
and
they're
I'm
they're
sitting,
mean sons of bitches.
They
too.
are, and I'm sitting here going, "You have wings, fly over the damn road."
Or get run over.
Yeah,
there
exactly. Anyway,
so and look, I have hunted
God.
geese. I can't stand the way they taste. They're awful. They're awful in every way. We make jerky out of them or something, so they become somewhat palatable.
Oh my God, yeah. You know what? I'm gonna do. This is a good thing because I'm gonna give a 7-day warning to everybody. Next Friday is Valentine's Day.
Oh yeah.
So here's your 7-day warning, because if we talk about it next Friday, it's too damn late.
All right, so there you go. Do something wonderful for your loved one.
Think about it, maybe, because now think about it. The 14th is a Friday. That's not the day to go out to eat. You want to do it on the 13th.
It should be the
Thursday.
It should be Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
Valentine's Day.
I do too. I do too. I do. And not
Right.
that I'm not a romantic person. I'm just not. I'm not a romantic.
I'm
person,
romantic
though.
every day. I don't need Valentine's Day.
I know.
For me.
It's too much of a spotlight. But you got your 7-day warning, listener.
So
female or male, you have a 7-day warning.
I have the same wonderful and outrageous at the same time. I think it's wonderful that Trump is digging into this to all the government spending that's going on and ferreting it all out. It is also outrageous what I'm seeing and reading about that we're spending money on. So at the same time, both are wonderful, and it is both wonderful and outrageous. But beyond that, I will say something a little bit more personal. I had dinner with a dear friend and his wife last night. Norm, you met with him. I think you did the same last week, and he is doing awesome. And it was just a good time to get back together with some friends after. I think we all, particularly in the winter and after the holidays, we sort of cocoon up and don't get out enough. And so for those of you out there that have thinking, man, there's my friends I haven't seen in a while, go call, text, make the dinner. Give it to the general, my wife, who can get it scheduled and get it done and meet and catch up with your friends, because I just felt better immediately on the drive home. So that was a wonderful experience.
Good.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to shut it down on this episode of Common Sense Ohio, where we are coming at you from channel 511. You want us to cover a topic, you can just give us a shout. You can go to, I was going to say Lawyer Talk Podcast, but it is not. We're at commonsenseohioshow.com. Just shoot us a comment on any of the media platforms or whatever. But either way, we're coming at you right from the middle here in Ohio. Until next week.